Okay, in this tutorial we're going to look at how to deep etch a profile photo. So I've got this picture here of Joan from Mad Men. She's our background layer that we've just opened. So now I'm going to make a new layer. So Command J. And then we're going to need one in between. So I'm going to go down here and make a new layer. And then I'm putting the copy we just made over the top. So now our transparency is in the middle there. And I'm going to rename that just so we know what we're talking about. So that's going to be our transparency layer. Just name that top one as well. Okay, so we're going to fill this transparency layer with a colour so that we can see what we're doing when we're cutting around the picture. So I'm going to grab a bright colour here, a nice bright magenta. So that'll contrast nicely. And then go into the paint bucket tool. And I'm just going to click over the image and dump that colour on. Now you won't be able to see it because she's on the top, but if you see in your palette, the transparency layer is now filled with pink. So the next thing we've got to do is cut out that background. So I'm using the direct selection tool here to just mark out the most of the background. And you press delete. That'll delete that information away, exposing the transparency layer underneath. Now you can see in the bottom right hand corner there's a little bit left. So we need to delete that. So I'm going to use this tool here. And I'm just going to click around that corner and join it up. And that selects that, so we can delete that, pressing the delete key. And the last thing we're going to do is zoom in a bit because around her hair it's still a little bit messy and a bit choppy, and we can clean that up a bit. So using the eraser tool, a little bit like the brush, we're just going to make the softness of that by bumping it up and then coming up here and bring down the hardness a bit. And we're just going to soften up the edges of that hair so that she doesn't look so raggedy and cut out around the hairline. So just painting that back in, not too much, just taking off the sharp edges. And you can spend as much time on this as you like. Once you're done, you can zoom back out. Okay, we've cut out everything we don't want on that top layer, and it's now exposing that transparency layer underneath. So that bottom layer with the background, we don't need that anymore, so we're going to delete that. And we're just left with these two layers. Now if you switch that off, you can see the difference. So she's been cut out now. So to save, you need to go to File, Save As. And we want to save it as a Photoshop file, so make sure you rename it and save it as a .psd, which is a Photoshop file, and that way it'll keep your transparency when you're placing it into something like InDesign. The last thing you can do is save a copy as a JPEG, which will mean that it will now be flattened, which will give it a white background, useful for something like adding a photo to the website.
A blossom fell